We live in the Anglo world in the way that people in 200 AD lived in the Roman world. We are ruled by Keynes's idiot grandchildren. I think it's appropriate to consider economics the current religion.
So since you were saying about the lie of the Western economic system.
Yeah, although I would say the Anglo economic system. So we live in the Anglo world in the way that people in 200 AD lived in the Roman world, or even people in 500 AD. They still lived in the Roman world even though the Roman Empire had ended. Economics before 1900 is a lot more blunt. How much gold do you have? How many soldiers do you have? What are your logistics? How fast can you get an army somewhere? And then after World War II, Keynes comes along. We live in the age of Keynes. So Keynes comes along and he basically makes this pitch to the elite, which is, hey, the conditions have changed. The money has become centralized. It's no longer a commodity money. It's all in the banks anyway. We can print more of it. You can use that to get where you want to go. It won't be visible to most people. However, we need something that we're going to say to them. So I would say that Anglo economics, after Keynes, became Keynesian, and the lie is that all of this is meaningful, that this is the correct description of what's going on. But it's subordinate. You have the actual system, and then you have this bit, and that's our economics
understanding.
Those are our economics courses.
Yeah.
They deliberately leave out the larger reality. These SWOT analyses of businesses and how to cope with the markets and all of these are based on the lie that the markets are free, that the system is not being fundamentally changed by the injection of new money all the time at an ever-increasing rate. And so the pretense, for example, that you pay taxes for infrastructure when technically you could just print all the money you wanted, and they do. This is the equivalent of a religious tract. This is handed to you so that you can study it and argue over syntax in the way that people studied the pamphlets during the Reformation. It's just to keep you busy. The problem is that the priesthood eventually starts to believe its own
rhetoric.
Yeah, because the original people with Keynes, they understood the joke. They go, oh, yeah, we see what you're doing. Yeah, it'll work. This will work. Then they bring up their children, or rather they bring up other people's children who are hired and follow in their footsteps. And these people don't get the joke. And so all you have to do is wait 3 generations, and you have people implementing with a straight face things which were originally understood to be necessary covers. And that's where we are now. And I really wish we could have some people who understood that this is not a complete map of reality, and that following this will not help.
Yeah, and I've come across some articles and stuff. Obviously, I'm just in my second year, and I've already read people saying what you are taught in an economics course is not the reality, and there are things that they gloss over in economics courses with actual theories that you're fed as a theory, but then it's not how it works in the real world. But we're led to believe, and this is LSE, led to believe that this is how the economic world is. And I don't know if then you go into, for example, business, or you go into finance, and then as you gain real life experience, you realize that actually what you were taught is not the truth? Or do you just stay with that idea in your head that this theories and this like intangible mess is, and these, like, as you say, these arguments that are actually not so important that we are very much focusing on is actually the truth, and this is what our economic system actually is?
Both occur. So I've met people who I otherwise considered intelligent, who take this as truth.
Yeah.
Including people who were economists. And then I meet people, and it's always the same story. It's always some guy, he's 20 or 25, and he works for a guy who's 35 or 40 and says, look, this is what people say, but here's what you actually do.
Right.
And so it's always a Sith Lord thing where the master trains the apprentice and says, here are the cheat codes.
But it's kind of kept secret. It's like kept within the firm or within the...
Or just that partnership.
That partnership, yeah.
Because there's no advantage to...
Like everybody kind of thinks it's this, but actually
Yes.
nobody wants to tell you that, or nobody really realizes that this is how it works.
Yeah, that's it. When we all believed in God, then you had a priesthood and a religious system. And now we don't, but we still believe in money, we still believe in retirement, we still believe in shopping and travel. And so, unsurprisingly, economics takes on the social role of religion.
Yeah.
So no, I view this as exactly the same as studying Catholic theology in 1500. It's useful for making public arguments.
From what you've read now, what is it that has led you to think that this is not, in actuality, what the economic system is? Because obviously I've read this textbook and I've read other textbooks by this man, and I've been scratching my head and going, I don't like what I'm reading. I find that it's not factual, because I would look around and kind of think it's saying one thing, but I kind of have, simply by observing and by reading other things, not seen, I haven't, but some things that, for example, that I don't actually have experience with, like international business,
Right.
Then I take this, because this is supposed to be my reference for my course. This is a reference textbook that I have to follow and then supplement it with other...
Any textbook that does not have as a primary point the printing of trillions of dollars during the pandemic and the effect that had not only on who became wealthy and who became less wealthy, but specifically on if there's a source of money, if there's a fountain of money, the correct strategy is to align yourself to the needs of that fountain of money. And so we move away from business as production according to people's savings, like what they're going to spend their money on, and more towards business as political position relative to the fountain of money.
Right.
So we draw a distinction between economics and politics that does not exist.
Yes.
We talk about here's the right way to do a multinational business, but that depends on the nations, and it depends on the Chinese government's feelings or goals regarding electric cars. It does not rely as much on the cars that people want to buy. So at the small scale, if you open a small business or a bar or something, it really is about the money that people want to spend on a product. As soon as you go to this level, it isn't. It's all politics. But they can't say that. They're constrained not to. Economics suffers from physics envy. Economics wants to be a science. It wants to have graphs. It wants to have the academic kudos, credentialism, prestige of being of having perfect information. But if you accept the reality that it's at least half politics, if not more, and post 2020, post printing, even more, there's something called the Cantillon effect, which is how close are you to the source of money printing. And that's probably the main factor that matters in whether you get to buy a house. The closer you are, more likely you can have a house. I'm waffling a little bit, but the main point is the point of a textbook is not to produce genuine political players.
Yeah.
Ever. It can't be.
Why can't it be?
Because someone who is genuinely an agent in the world, that's a characteristic that you can't train for. You can't take someone and train that into them. It has to be sparked, and it has to be innate, and it's something you can cultivate, and it's something you can push to see if they have it. And then if they do, you passing on knowledge will matter.
Yeah.
If they don't have it, there's nothing you can do. Give them the textbook, let them memorize it, let them study it, let them do the exams, and let them get a job where gradually, or actually gradually then suddenly, their capacity to earn is diminished through inflation anyway. Because fundamentally they don't want to be an agent. This is perhaps better thought of as a psychological prop than as
A useful
a manual.
guide.
Yeah.
Well, I completely agree, really. I mean, obviously I don't know that much about economics still. I'm still learning.
I'm curious about the details of you were reading this
Yes.
and you felt it was off.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, with the first textbook I read, which was like Economics 101 or something like that, I found that there was no concise order to how things were being explained. So there was no structure. He kind of just was talking about one thing and then jumping to the other and then jumping to the other. So first I was like, this is a bit off. It's very hard to kind of follow. It's very, not flowery language, but intellectual language, where if you just read it and kind of just take it at face value, be like, this guy really knows what he's talking about, and like, he's making an argument, and la 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 la. But when you kind of look at it a bit closer, you kind of go like, there's not much actually being said. It's very vague. Like, he'll go countries. I'm like, okay, but what countries? And like governments, okay, what governments? And then he'll go, well, it was all very much, these are the models and this is the theory. And so because we have these models and because we have this theory, then this is how the world works. It was more like this must work, rather than going, the world is obviously complex and there's a lot of points to it, but we've kind of deciphered that there's this and this, but it's changing, and it was just that even like the words that were being used were so vague in any context about international business, about the political systems, about demand and supply. It was all very, someone prints money and someone
Who? There's no way to
and
tell. You couldn't
someone
possibly
does
find
this for the European Union, and some entity. It was all very like, there's someone who's doing it,
It all starts
and
with,
something.
we have money.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, you know, that somebody's influencing this, but no concise answer of who is influencing, or is it kind of like science where it's just things in the air interacting with each other and we have no control over it.
I think I can summarize by saying, very sadly, we are ruled by Keynes's idiot grandchildren. Keynes was a smart man. These guys are not.
And do you think that, like, for example, this man and other people like him that are making the economics modules and the textbooks and all this, do you think they actually believe this? Or do you think it's simpler to put things vaguely and say someone and something and not actually be, or do we just not know?
I think the majority of them do believe. I think they believe this is what economics is. I think that much, if you speak to a Muslim, there's a certain way they look at the world and they don't step outside of it. Or a Buddhist or any fairly self-contained belief system. And so modern Western economists are the same thing, where they have an ideological system and things keep happening, especially over the last 10 years, which don't fit. And their reaction is, we need more data. Their reaction is not, I need to ask myself whether what I believe is actually true.
Right, yeah.
So I would say that we are going through the equivalent of the Reformation, or about to, where the models aren't working and the old generation refuses to consider the possibility that they need Reformation.
Yeah.
But they're also not working visibly. I think it's appropriate to consider economics the current religion.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I watch a lot of documentaries, read a lot of articles, just to kind of supplement my studies. And everything I come across is either slightly more of a communist rhetoric or slightly more of a pro-capitalist liberalism rhetoric. But there's nothing really other than that I find. There's nobody's really talking about any other, well, I don't know if there is any other way of doing things, but communism didn't exist at one point, like as a theory, and now it does. There must be other ways of doing things.
Well, communism and I would say capitalism with American characteristics, those came into being because of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
And so the ideologies that we have at the moment are answers to the question of how do we organize ourselves around factories. And I would say, yes, there are other ways of doing things, and that currently we're in an argument over how best to organize around computer networks. We just don't have labels for the new ideologies that are, we don't, when you're in the middle of things, it's not as clear. But in 50 years, I think we'll look back and say, oh, these 4 ideologies, these 4 answers to the questions of how to live, given that we're organized around computer networks, we're going to look back and go, oh, this is when those ideologies emerged. And I actually think that's occurring right now.
Yeah. I have heard of data liberalism.
Yeah. So I don't know, what does that mean?
Well, I've just started looking into it.
It's just vibes.
The vibes are good. No, I'm not the right person to ask because I've just started looking at it and I only read about one lady that was talking about it.
I can guess.
I think it's the idea of like, no, actually, I can't. I don't want to say anything that's wrong.
Maybe not that, but here's a potential ideology that could emerge, and I think it should and will, and it's also unrelated to communism and unrelated to capitalism. Not unrelated, it's different. Currently, we've got a whole bunch of data about a whole bunch of people, and it's all locked up in big platforms. So I bet data liberalism is the philosophy that the center point of data should move to the individual.
Yeah.
And so if you think about us existing in computer networks in 40 years' time, an ideology based around the individual being the holder of their data, that's neither capitalism nor communism, but it is a kind of networkism. So that would be a new way of doing things, be a new way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
Should we wrap there?